Hey everyone, thank you for coming. I'm Michael Jovin-Dalton, the director of the JKC Gallery, and this is Ryan Casey, who really put the show together. And so we're just going to have a conversation, and everyone's going to introduce themselves. And then at the end, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. All right? So, y'all ready?
Sure.
Okay, here we go.
My name is Camilla, and I am showing my work with Right to Exist, which is a body of work that focuses on telling immigrant stories. And that sheds light on trauma. Yeah. And hopefully gives them a platform to tell their story. Yeah.
My name is Bridget Laudien. I am showing the 4 photos that are self-portraits. 2 of them are from 2005 and 2 of them are from this year. In the storytelling vein, I've used self-portraiture to tell my story for about 16 or 17 years. I've been through multiple traumas, so it's been a mode of healing. I've worked with other women who have also gone through trauma in the same way with photography. And that's what I'm bringing.
And my name is Kozak, and I worked on a project for 10 years called He Threw the Last Punch Too Hard. It's about my relationship with my mother after she was left brain damaged by her second husband's abuse. And I'll talk a little bit about the book that I released last year during COVID. Thanks.
I'm glad we're all here together.
Me too.
I actually had a question, if you don't mind, if
Sure.
I start.
Please.
It hopped out at me when I was reading about both of your works. One of the things that really came to my forefront was that you said a lot of people were skeptical to participate in the project. And I was wondering, now that you have a body of work and it's as good as it is and it's giving people a platform, if that has changed at all.
With people being skeptical.
Or being like more willing to participate now that you can show them.
Right.
You know.
I think that notion of people being skeptical comes from their status. A lot of the people that I approached were not documented. So they wanted to keep anonymous and stay anonymous. I think they were skeptical about where their story would lead, who would see it. But moving forward, I think that, I think people are definitely more willing, and I think now I have sort of a more open approach to approaching people, telling them about my project, and I think people are less skeptical now. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I guess I have a question for you, Hannah.
Sure.
So do you feel that your work has helped your mother? I mean, this work is about you and your mother. And do you feel that it has helped both of you together, or
It's a good question.
like how does she feel after you doing this project?
When I started this project, I didn't know my mother. She was a stranger to me. And there was a lot of disconnect in the initial photos. But as I started to spend time with her and let down my guard, I started to find out that she was this lovely person. And I think it's the most important work I've ever done. When my mother goes to take her last breath, she knows I love her. what could be more important than that? So it healed my relationship with her. It healed our relationship. And then in the process of creating the book, it allows other people to share their stories, which is, I think, for me, why I decided to go ahead and share it, because it was so deeply personal. I remember the first time I stood up in graduate school. Well, actually, someone stood up in graduate school. Let me backpedal a tiny bit. I was a stunt woman for 25 years. I broke both my feet jumping out of a helicopter onto the tallest building downtown LA. And it was that inability to move that made me sit still and realize, my God, I have no relationship with my mother. And so I started to go, I enrolled in a curriculum, a master's degree, where I knew they say to you, what's the most difficult relationship you have in your life? And all of you know who that is without me even asking you separately, right? And you think you can't heal this relationship, it's impossible, but you can. And the way you do it is you start forgiving yourself for judging the person that you've been judging. So the first time someone stood up in class and started to share, as I started to share, I thought, oh my God, I'd rather jump out of this building backwards on fire than share my intimacy with strangers. So that all shifted as I started to go deeper and deeper into the work. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did.
But tell me more about your process. I want to hear more about your process, both of you. In starting, what prompted you to start? My work is all organic. I don't choose it. It chooses me. So what made you start to do what you do?
Mine was a similar organic process. When I became estranged from my whole family, I was an incest survivor, and my older brother had sexually abused me, and right at the beginning of college, one of my friends who had known about the abuse and helped me heal winded up dating him and marrying him. And through telling my story, I have lost the majority of my family. I've lost a lot. And I had a camera right when this was all going on, and I had started to take very vulnerable self-portraits. You know, I had been cutting, I shaved my head, I was acting out, and I started documenting myself as angry and as fiercely and as vulnerably as I could, and I would kind of move between them. And as the process went on of trying to get people back and losing people and going to therapy and everything else, I just kept documenting my body, for better or for worse. And throughout the years, because I don't have a lot of family and because I was gaslit a lot, these pictures kind of give me the ability that, like, no matter what anybody says to me, I'm like, this is what I look like. So if I ever doubt my progress, I can look at before and now. And I think that so much of going through this is beyond language. It's beyond explanation. Yeah. And I think that photos just capture, you know, Ryan's description of this project was, can a photo hold pain and resiliency, and is it the memory? And I think the answer is yes. And I think that everything that I hold will always be in those two realms. And the photography just hits a note that nothing else ever could, and I just never stopped. And I did these portraits on purpose. These were probably the only non-organic self-portraits because I was given the chance to tell my story, and I have made so much progress that I never went back, and then I just recreated them 16 some odd years later.
Right. I was going to ask, how old were you when you took those first black and white?
I was 19.
Photos? 19. Okay.
I was in college. It was at the height, like, literally, I didn't want to be in my body. I didn't want to be in my life. It was at, like, the very height of my trauma, right before it got, like, inexplicably difficult. That was really, like, ground zero of what happened to me. And then it's funny because I usually show a collection, and I forced myself to bookend these, which is why I specifically recreated them without them being organic, because I wanted to see what 19-year-old Bridget looks like at 35, like with everything, everything that I had been through, and I really liked the side by side. There are like hundreds in between, but these are the ones because they just speak, it speaks volumes. It's a very long journey.
Right.
So
Time is
I
important.
want to commend you for the bravery that it took not only to do the work, but to face, your family. I know it's not. There's always one member of the family that tells but also that tells the truth, and they generally are not
well received.
Well, I went to Guatemala to take a writing class because I knew I was going to eventually tell my story, which I did in here. And I asked that question. It was the number one question asked. How do you tell your story without hurting your family? You know what Joyce Maynard said? Write like you're an orphan. And I said, okay. Because readers are intelligent, and if you try to leave things out and protect mother, father, brother, sister, you're lying to the reader, and they know it. Yeah. And they won't connect. So you have to, for better or for worse, you have to tell the truth.
Well, in the same way you said telling your story gives you the opportunity for other people to tell their story, that's true in my case, but also my mom is on the Zoom. Hi, Mom. And she has never stopped me. It hasn't been easy, but she has never stopped me. And there are family members and like friends here and people. The level of connection I feel like is so parallel to the story. And when you do tell your story, the right family members won't be upset, and the right people won't be upset. They'll be happy that you're.
The photo book is connective tissue between people in the world's nervous system. So when you release it out into the world, it gives them permission. That's what I feel. Yeah. And you keep gleaning something new from it every time you pick it up. So, bravo.
I think you touched on things that I wanted to talk about. You talked about sharing your story, and you also talked about, you asked, why did I start the project, right? Right to exist. So as an immigrant, coming here at the age of 10, I felt alone. I didn't feel like I could relate to anybody. I was made fun of for the way I looked, my accent at the time, and I grew up feeling sort of like an outsider my whole life. I grew up speaking another language at home, and then I would go to school and I would have to sort of code switch into being an American, per se. And I started this project because I wanted to connect to other people that had similar experiences. So I wanted to see if other people had shared experiences like I did. So, in the process, when I found the people that did want to come forth and tell their story, I had them come to a studio, and I set it up, and then we had these recorded conversations, and I told my story. And in that, I think they felt more comfortable telling their story. Mm-hmm. And that connection was made to be able to take the photograph that I did. You know, I wouldn't have been able to take the photographs I did without having those conversations beforehand.
I think it's important also to keep the love inside of all the hurt.
Yeah.
You know, it's supposedly no one wants to read an angry writer, but I think with photography it's different. I think it's okay to show anger, it's okay to show
Anything.
anything in photography. It's not like writing, because you don't think about of all your favorite books. Is the writer pissed off? Really, they've done a lot of work to get to the point where they start the journey.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. And that speaks too to the question that I'd asked you before about people becoming more willing, because I realized with my work, as soon as I did this for myself, I wanted to capture other people. So I went to other people who I knew were traumatized, family members, friends. The woman who actually winded up marrying my brother was a part of this project originally, because she had also been through trauma. And as I watched people unfold, it almost like helps you heal yourself, and then it gives you permission to share. And as I've gone on, about like 7 or 8 years ago, my project with other people took a turn, and I started capturing really beautiful pictures. Like, they weren't like so grotesque, like, for lack of a better word. They weren't so upfront. It was like people's families, and it was like the subtleties of things that I noticed that when I started doing that and people saw it, it resonated more and more. Like, it becomes a snowball.
Yeah, I think that when I started taking the portraits of my subjects, I almost like saw myself in those images, and it was healing for me. And I didn't realize that when I started it,
that would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really profound, to be able to connect in that way and see myself and hear myself in their stories, I think.
I did have a question about your actual process also, because you said you used a medium format camera, which, if anybody doesn't know, is like a giant, takes much longer camera. And I was interested because I feel like our culture these days, everything is so like quick and easy, and we're used to like digital, being done quickly and everything. If that pause that you had with the people switched like the way that you related to them, or switched what you captured, because I personally could never do medium format, because I have to like get it out of me. I'm not like a slow process person. So I've always been curious about like, what is that like doing the portraits, especially this intimately, with all the setup and the time and attention.
I think it leans more towards making that connection and that shared that shared space. I think it gives space and for them to connect more with themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, get more comfortable with the portrait being taken, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. I directed them a little bit, but I really wanted them to give space for them to be themselves. Number one, I wanted them to feel comfortable. If they weren't comfortable, then I wasn't doing my job. So slowing down the process allowed space for more connection, I think. If it seems so insensitive,
For like rush.
digital sometimes, I feel like manual. There's definitely more sensitivity to that.
And it's more intentional.
Yeah.
I have to do a lot, I find, with digital to overcome, like when I work with other people, and even with myself, like, I bring music, I set aside time. It's usually at like a very romantic lighting time of the day, and I go somewhere secluded. So I try to do a lot to like overcome, the quickness of it. Like,
Yeah.
and it's still, we spend, 60, 90 minutes together, but you have to do a lot to make it feel as special as film inherently does.
Right.
Because it's so intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 4x5, there's a magic to it. I think.
Yeah, your
large
photographs
format.
are amazing.
Yeah.
There's a magic to analog, period.
You used analog as well, right?
There's a lot of analog.
So what was your intention in using analog?
Analog has more layers. It has more depth.
Yeah.
It has more richness. a lot of photographers shoot digitally and spend umpteen hours in front of their computer trying to recreate analog. I don't want to sit in front of the computer. I'd rather just photograph with film. Plus, there's magic to it. You put the roll in, and then you get to wait until it's back from being developed. There's an inherent magic to that.
Yeah.
That brings me back to that 10-year-old girl getting my film developed and waiting for it to come back and not really knowing 100% what's going to be there. That's magic. You don't have that magic with digital where you can chimp and just look at the back screen.
Were your double exposures also in camera?
Those are all double exposures on a Rolleiflex 2.8F, where I really had no idea if they were going to even come out. So there's something about film that still gets me really excited.
Yeah.
It does. And photography books were my first love. Photography was my second. So putting them together, it's like, oh my God. Yeah. I love film.
Yeah. Yeah, I think moving forward, I want to delve deeper into alternative process and using film, black and white film, but then turning that film into color using Van Dyke Brown, cyanotype.
Yeah,
Sort of.
that's interesting too. Yeah, you might even enjoy playing with what I call like the antithesis of digital, which is like the Holga. It's just a plastic lens. It has two settings, f8 or f11.
Yeah,
You get really groovy stuff with it.
lomography, right?
Cheap little $39 camera. Some of my favorite photography I've ever made is with the Holga 120N. It's a big negative.
Yeah, it's 120. Yeah,
It's a
that's
120. You can get it in 35, but why bother? Get the
Right.
120. Yeah.
You shot your pieces in there on 120?
That's because this project went
Or
over
35.
a decade, so I probably went through 10 cameras in
Oh.
10 years.
They were all film.
It's a combination of film and digital. Anything from a Canon 5D Mark II to a Fujifilm X-T1 to a Rolleiflex 2.8F. A little bit of everything. You change over 10 years, hopefully, right? You're not going to just stick with one camera, probably. But maybe you would.
4x5 is easy to stick
4x5 is the
I
whole.
was gonna say 4x5 gets expensive. You keep changing your camera.
Yeah, yeah.
4x5, like, is it like the one that Sally Mann shot with?
I use a Toyo.
Okay.
I'm not sure what Sally Mann shot with.
Sally Mann, I don't know, she shot with 4x5,
I'm
right?
not sure what kind.
For Immediate Family,
Yeah,
her 1991 book
yeah.
that she got blasted for.
I know.
The church tore her to shreds.
Because of the photos
Because
of her
her-
daughter, right?
Her children were nude in it. But they were nude because that's what children do when they're running around and they're kids. But the publicity, essentially, the book sold out. There were so many reprints, and it put her, so to speak, on the map because, oh my God, the children are nude.
Child pornography.
Child pornography. That's what the church was saying.
Yeah.
And so they blasted her. But there's some of the most stunning photographs shot with film, with the 4x5.
Yeah. I'm just telling you, there's magic in there.
Magical, right?
Yeah.
We come back to that magic,
In that
or
box.
whatever we have to do to have magic. Everything's too fast with the phones and digital cameras, and technology has its good and bad merits because nothing is bad or good. It's thinking that makes it so, right? Who said that? Shakespeare? But the truth is, there is something about the constant looking at our phones that is creating these synapses that prevents us from being able to sit down and read anymore.
Right.
I do think, though, that one of the merits, like, there are certain things that I've shot, a fair amount that I've shot, that I couldn't on film. I've been working on my other, like, passion project other than post-traumatic growth is animal rights, and I've worked on basically, like, an anti-zoo, anti-aquaria project for 11 years. And the conditions of like trying to shoot in a zoo, like film was not going to do it, and I couldn't. There were instances where I would have gotten kicked out, and a lot of the animal rights photojournalists I know, absolutely film is like 100% not an option because of the way that they have to shoot. And I think that having the portability of that and having the ability to capture things we otherwise weren't able to, I mean, like George Floyd, that wasn't happening with a film video camera. That was a cell phone. And
Absolutely. That's why I
like
say it's not necessary. There's nothing's good or bad.
Yeah.
There's merits on each side.
There is like, I think that it definitely removes some of the intimacy with like this work, portrait work, but I think that there's a whole like social, political, there's so many movements that
Very important.
Yeah.
I think there's an urgency that comes with digital.
Right.
We
know?
saw what was happening to George Floyd. We saw it with
Right.
our own two eyes. It's been happening forever, but we saw it because of that cell phone.
Right.
So it was,
And I think digital photography, I brought this with me. This book, Hidden, isn't mine totally, but it's the first photojournalism anthology of animal rights photography, broken up into several categories, and it's across the globe. And there has never been anything like it published before. The artists that are in here, other than myself, you know, the work, it has never been seen. It's basically...
see, look, it's great.
It's part of how we can, the urgency and you can sneak things in there. And I mean, some of them were in life-threatening situations to get those pictures, but
I understand.
This book will change.
You can't shoot at ISO 16,000.
Oh my gosh, some of the
Right.
grain and it's
right. I get it.
technicality kind
I
of,
understand.
you know, but that's why I think for photojournalism it's better. For portrait work it's a little bit less intimate. But I do think the immediacy, like especially what you were talking about, like sitting down with a giant camera, having someone sit in front of you, like that's definitely a different interaction. It's very intimate. And
Yeah.
It leaves a lot of space
It does.
That's
rather
what
than
I'm trying to
moving.
achieve that intimacy. Right.
I found that like as a trauma survivor for myself and a lot of the women that I worked with, because it was so hard for me to be in my body, the fleetingness of digital photography and almost like, especially when I work with other people, like doing it quicker was more tolerable. Where I think if I had to like
Sit down with yourself.
really sit, and then especially like you said, like, oh, we get to like look at the back of it. I think looking at the back of it, you know, is this constant reassurance of like, it's very vulnerable having someone take a film picture of you and not knowing what's on the other side of it.
Right.
And I
Not
think
knowing
that
right away.
it was so much easier for me to play with my body and be in my body and not having to send the film to a lab because no one ever saw it unless I would show it to them. It would stay on my hard drive and my camera, and I didn't have any other eyes. There are thousands of pictures of me and tons of other women that will never see the light of day. And I liked removing that. When I left college, I didn't have access to a darkroom anymore. I liked taking that power back because I feel like, you know, after being traumatized, as much as you can do to like retell your story when you're 100% in control was beneficial also.
I understand that. Yeah, that makes complete sense. I did a lot of self-portrait work too during the course of this, so I understand in many ways.
Did you do them with your mom as well? Like
There's
with
a lot
the
of
two of you together?
there's a lot of self-portraiture with my mother.
What did you feel was the hardest part of your story to come face to face with through the imagery?
This woman was a stranger who just happened to be my mother. So I was having to let down all my guard that I had so painstakingly erected over my entire life. I had to drop all that in order to start spending time with her.
Did you feel like you could see that change? Like literally
Literally.
from, you know, the 10 years, I'm sure.
I was so angry. How could it not change? I was angry at her. I was just kind of pissed off, you know, and that melts away. That drops away when you start to heal, and when I started to forgive. Look, I didn't need to forgive her. She didn't do anything wrong. How many of us could be 23 years old and have 5 children all 1 year apart? She fell in love with someone else. How many of us have fallen in love with someone we're not supposed to fall in love with? We all have. So it was a 10-year-old little girl stuck in an adult body being angry at her mother, right?
Plus, she had to leave that relationship.
She had to leave. She danced the flamenco in Guatemala. She was so passionate and vibrant, and she was locked down with 5 children, and my dad didn't believe in the woman doing anything other than cooking or cleaning. He was a Holocaust survivor. While I was working on this project, I was also working on a project on my father who survived 8 Nazi camps. I was a lot of fun for 10 years, let me tell you. Traveling to Poland and Germany and the Czech Republic. So I was alternating between photographing my mother, healing that, and hanging out in concentration camps. And I got a real understanding of what my mother must have felt like being locked down at home with kids and no help. I would have lost my mind. I would have. There's no way I could do that and be expected to cook and clean. I'm not even domesticated at all. I never wanted to be. It's nothing that I thought is something to be proud of. Have we ever been in a funeral where they go, God, she kept such a clean home? Who cares?
No.
So, yeah. This book, I worked on this book for 10 years, but I think it took 50 years of emotional algebra to get to the place where I could even start photographing my mother.
Yeah.
So this is my entire soul is in this book. And part 2 will be the story on my father. Yeah, that'll be the next one. I like books. Like I said, I think they're the perfect object. They're tangible. You feel them, you smell the paper, and you get to keep learning from them every time you pick them up. Shows are wonderful, but they go up and they come down, and they're a lot of work, as you know. But this, you can keep learning from it over and over, and I have. There's still favorite photo books I keep going back to, like Donna Ferraro's Lust and Love, or Donna Ferraro's Living with the Enemy. It's her book about domestic violence, right? Or Ruth Bernhard's Nudes. You know, I keep getting something from those books every time I pick them up. There's something about that I love.
Well, you're definitely inspiring me to open up that valve and look into the relationship between me and my father.
There you go. And see, and that's part of why I did this, is we all have someone in our life that we need to learn how to mend the relationship, including me. That wasn't the only one in my family, trust me.
I actually think it's totally fine to never mend it and leave it. I think that
It's
some
individual.
people,
Absolutely.
I think that some people's healing looks like domestication. I think that some people's healing looks like anger. I think that trying not to be angry for 20 years ate me from the inside out.
Oh, I'm not saying at all not to be angry.
And I think that everybody's healing looks different, and we should continue to be respectful of those who know that the people who hurt them are not worth mending, and that's also okay, and there's space in the world where that's the right decision, and it's completely fine to mend it if you want to, but you certainly don't have to, and forgiveness is certainly not required for healing, and neither is letting go of the anger.
For you, in your situation, I would say 100%. For me, with my mother, I can't hold on to anger at my mother. For me, it didn't serve me. But if what happened to you happened to me, I don't know, maybe I would think differently.
Right.
I don't know that you can really quantify it as like, okay, one's sexual abuse and one's abandonment. I think that people's trauma, again, it's so far beyond language that it's not really, it's, at the end of the day, everybody just kind of has to go through it. And I think it's really important to just leave space for everything, like all of the unspeakable things that no one will ever know.
There's no question. I can only speak for me and my trauma and what I went through. I didn't want my mother to take her last breath and think that I didn't love her.
Right.
For me. That's all I can speak about. Everyone's got their own journey. We all came in with different karma, if you will.
I think that culturally a lot of like language around healing like has so much wrapped up in like bringing the other person back or letting it go or making it better. And the older I get, like it's just, there's so many sloppy, open-ended, never going to get answer situations that like the real piece is just
With yourself.
that's it. It's just going to be sloppy and open-ended, and I'm never going to understand why certain people did this. And I don't know if sometimes I'll be angry and sometimes I won't. And some days I'll want to forgive everybody, and some days I'll just want everybody, you know, to die thinking that I'm angry at them. And I think that it's like very non-linear.
I agree with you. That whole time heals all wound, I think, is Hallmark card bullshit.
Yeah.
Time doesn't heal all wounds. You learn how to live with
Right.
the pain. That's
Right.
all that you do.
Right.
But is it easy for me to go see my mother who's been institutionalized for 41 years?
Sure not.
No, it's still really difficult.
Absolutely.
But at least I don't hate her.
Yeah.
That's all. It's still really hard to visit her.
Yeah.
It really is. Imagine, most people, your parents, or maybe you have to put them in a home at 80 or 90, they're there a year or two, and they're gone. I've been visiting her for 41 years in a home. It's hard on her, it's hell on me, it's hell on a whole family, without question. It hasn't been an easy journey. She wasn't dealt an easy deck.
Do you feel like, this is a question you both, do you feel like your work with your trauma has helped even just like a little bit with what has happened in your life? And like what do you think has come out of this, connecting with the community, with other people that have been through similar things?
I actually haven't found, I've worked with multiple women who have been sexually abused, but I'm also a nurse, and a lot of my traumas have been, I don't want to say medical, because not at the hospital, but it's been, people losing family members, or postpartum depression, or oncology patients, like people who have cancer. That's been a lot of it, just because of like the nature of my like adult life. But personally, my photographs have changed I do not know how I would have learned to relate to my body, love my body, sit in my power, be comfortable with myself naked, ever, if I hadn't sat in front of a camera over and over. And the things that I did terrible things to myself and took pictures of it. I did really nice things and took pictures of it. And like following that spectrum alone, after like my nervous system was never regulated, right? And my self-perception, because the trauma was developmental, and the abuse wasn't the only thing that happened. There were other things also in my family that happened. It was all developmental. I truly found who I was in front of a camera before I knew who that was, because you could see it and you processed emotions that I've been in therapy on and off. Therapy is amazing, and I think that it's a very integral part, but there is this part of seeing yourself that changes everything. It wiped away so much shame. I always say, thank God I had women in my life who were not ashamed of their bodies, like my mom, my aunts. Nobody was ashamed of their body in my family. That and photography is single-handedly why I was able to be so resilient with myself after that. Yeah. I honestly, that's the part that I can't put into words, is like how that transforms you. And I think that other women seeing that, and me seeing other women pick themselves up after horrific things, it's like that silly saying, like the proof is in the pudding. Like the photographs
Speak for themselves.
They just speak for themselves. And before I knew what I was doing, they were there showing me, this is who you are, this is what you look like, and I could show them to other people slowly, and I could show people certain pictures and then not others. There was a lot of titration that it offered that made me feel so much more powerful than having to like verbally share my story or not share my story at all. It was a little bit here, a little bit there. It was discussions with certain people. I could show them to certain people who I wanted to know that I was hurt without showing them that I was hurt. It was very removed. But then they knew that like that was in me. So that was huge too.
I'm thinking as you're speaking because I actually started my self-portrait nudes almost 20 years before I started healing with my mother. So there is something about that. But
It's like a journey.
it's a journey, and I'm embryonic in most of the photos. It's almost like I wanted back in my mother's womb where it was safe. It's too painful being out here.
And it's funny, you see like your body takes shape, and then you see like that's what I mean. Like before I knew what was happening, I'm like, oh, look at what am I doing? Like, and you would see these parts, you know.
I didn't even understand why I was doing it.
Right, it's like instinctual. You just do it with your body, and then you see it later.
I remember the first time I saw the first nudes, which I did in January 2020 with a film camera, and I had some of them made into silver gelatin prints, 8x10. I looked at them, I thought, I'm nude. What am I going to do with these? And I put them away for decades. And then I thought, so what? It's just a nude body.
Yeah, we
and
all
I
have
started reading about art and the nude, and like, naked's accidental, but nude is purposeful and powerful. And it empowers me. It empowered me.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I'm going to show them. And if someone has a problem with it, Sat Nam. Truth is my identity. And Gurmukhi was the title of
That's
a project that she worked on. Sat Nam. If anyone has a problem with it, whether it's family or friend, I don't care. I'm not doing the work for an audience. I'm doing it for me. It's how I process. It's how I journey. That's what art is.
Well,
in my little humble opinion, like if everything was okay, why would I have the need to photograph myself over and over repetitively in these postures where I look like I want to be back in my mother's womb? If everything was okay, I wouldn't be doing that.
Right, and I feel like I was going to say that's kind of where photography, I feel like, intersects with like writing and talking, and the photography, it is simultaneously so internal and so external because you're not doing it for an audience, but that's simultaneously the only time anybody's going to see what you're doing. So it's like inherently not for them and
It's
for
not.
them.
But if you're creating work for likes.
Oh, no, I didn't mean like that.
No, I know, but I'm just saying as an adjunct, if you're creating for likes, just stop.
Right.
Because it
You
won't
should
be
sit
any
with
good.
it.
Just
Right.
sit with
Right.
what you're doing and why you're doing it. Are you doing it for you?
Right.
Are you doing it for an audience?
And I feel like that's something that left with film. I was trained on film, so I feel like I very much retained that. I can hold on to things for a very long time and go back to them and go back to them and go back to them. But the immediacy of sharing, but I meant more so the intimacy of like viewership. Is that a word? Viewership? Like
think
the
so.
viewing the photographs. It's like if a tree falls in the forest, will anybody hear it fall? If you take a photograph and nobody ever looks at it, what does that do to that photograph? And there are photographs like that. I have tons of them.
Of
But
course
then,
you do.
But then, you know, it changes once you show someone, but you don't have to show them, you don't have to be naked in front of someone to show them a nude photo of yourself. So there is that internal, external, personal, and social component that I can't find another art form
Right.
that hits that.
If it-
Music, maybe, like, because you write it, but then you perform it, but even still, that's still very seated in, like, performing, which I could
Right, and if you
never
think about,
do.
I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Vivian Meyer, the photographer that was the nanny that they discovered around 2009. Oh my God, she left behind this body of work. A lot of the film wasn't even developed.
Right.
She really did it because she had to photograph. It was a compulsion.
Yeah.
And that's what I think art is, that repetition, that compulsion, that do it over and over and over.
And
It's
explore.
almost like, you know, it's a form of OCD, right? But you end up with something you can leave behind, whether it's prints or, in my case, I like books, as I've shared, and I'll share 100 million more times. But you leave something behind other than a garage full of clutter.
Right.
I've gone through that. Like, I don't want to leave behind a garage full of clutter. I want to leave behind books.
I have a question about your work, especially because it's medium format.
Yeah.
Medium format is traditionally
format, actually.
large format. Sorry.
Yeah.
See, that's how bad I am at the technicality of it. Because they lend themselves to being blown up, blown up beautifully. Do you have any plans to showcase your work in a book or keep showing it and?
Yeah, so Philip is just one of the 5 that I've done so far, but I would love to keep it going and bring this to other cities, and then
The
eventually
bigness really lends itself to that.
eventually have something concrete where people can open up and read the stories. Of course, that's different than hearing their voice. It's much more intimate hearing their story with their own voice. But I think a book is forever.
It's forever. And if I brought a couple with me, and I'll sign it for you, and then you'll have a piece of me forever too. Can you tell I love books? I when I was little, honestly, my brothers, 3 of them were in one room. My sister was in a single bed in a room with my dad. My grandmother was on a couch, and I would roll my little bed in every night, slept in the room where my grandmother was. And then I had this bookshelf. It was filled with books. I had my little light and my flashlight. And I would just read my books, and I would escape with my books. They were always a friend to me, just like photography was always a friend to me, and kept me such company during the trauma of when I started watching my mother being abused on weekends. And I'd curl up with my books, and they saved me, and they still do.
Something special about photo books, too, I think.
There's something very special about photo books because the viewer can interpret it however they want. You don't have to listen to anything I'm saying tonight. You can walk away from here tonight and go, oh my God, that girl, Hannah. But you can take the book away and come up with your own insights.
Yeah,
right?
perspectives.
And perspectives. That's what's so groovy about them.
Yeah. But yeah, I would like to make a book when I have more stories to tell. And maybe eventually also include mine and start taking self-portraits.
Yes, and I think your story is valuable, but when you were talking, I didn't want to be forward and suggest that, but I was thinking the whole time, she should interview herself. But the thing that I thought too, especially hidden, the reason why it was published the way it was published, which reminds me of your work, is that there's a bigness to it. There's a lot of full bleeds. There's a lot of half bleeds. Yeah. It's a 5-pound book. And the heaviness was not lost on the publishers. That was specifically because it's a heavy book, literally, figuratively, the animals in it, the pain, the suffering, and we didn't want it to be a coffee table book. And when I look at your pictures, the bigness, the personality of it, it really comes across. If you make one, you got to make it one of those
big books,
one that doesn't fit on the bookcase, that you have to leave it out in a special spot, and it's 10 pounds, and every time you move you're oh my God, why is this book so heavy?
Yeah.
I actually just have, my mom years ago bought me an Annie Leibovitz book, The Photographer's Life, and I got really big into minimalism, so much so that I was I don't need this anymore, and I just had to go find it at a vintage bookstore and rebuy it because I missed it so much, and again, it doesn't fit on my bookcase, and again, I'm
big.
Frustrated at how big it is, but I missed it so much that I just wanted it back. There's something very special. It really is you carry that around with you. I think your project would be amazing for that.
Thank you.
Especially given
the subject matter, yeah.
The subject matter given, the time that we're living in.
Yeah.
It's very relevant and important and big.
Yeah.
It should be big.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's getting there. I want to take it to bigger heights. Yeah. More cities.
Well, when you're ready, just email me and I'll give you some tips and insights on the process of publishing a photo book.
Okay.
It's not for the weak-hearted.
Okay.
It's hard.
It's as brutal and lurid as the beating was.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's not easy.
Do you feel like it was well received? Have you gotten a lot of feedback? I know you said you published it last year during the pandemic.
Once we got out of the COVID Trump election news cycle, we started to get some traction. Prior to that, it was challenging, but The Lucy Foundation, which is the equivalent of the Oscars for photo books, they shortlisted it as the best first photo book of last year. So that helped, thanks. That helped. And Women Photograph chose it, and BuzzFeed chose it as one of their favorite books during a hell year. I think that was the title of the article, wasn't it? So yeah, I got traction once people would actually like look at it and flip through it when everyone was so traumatized by the election year that it was hard to really think of anything else.
Hard to bring.
It was a tough year to release a book.
This was published last year also.
Tough year, but having said that, this is going to sound horrible, but domestic violence soared last year. So that actually brought a lot of eyes to it.
I like that part in your statement that you said, you know, that you would hope that it would inspire women, you know, to move their feet before it gets to bed.
A lot of women will write to me either Facebook or direct message on Instagram, which I loathe, or I don't like direct messages, or on Facebook, and they'll start telling me their whole story, because that's part of what happens when you release something very personal. But when they say something like, you know, he left me black and blue last weekend, but I love him so much, and I know, like, I'm not a psychologist, even though I have a master's in psychology. I'm just a photographer telling her story. They're not ready. That's where they need to go get some professional help. Because as long as you think that this person who's abusing you loves you, you got to go get some help. Because that's not love in any way, shape, or form. And you can lie to yourself all you want and tell yourself it's love. It's not. And I'm going to stay very firm on that because I witnessed it. So it has inspired women to leave abusive relationships. It's inspired people to look at their own relationships and whatever they want to do with them. And that's really the point, I think, of any art, is to make you feel. We are all going around doing this. That's why addiction is so profound, because it's really painful to feel what happened to us and what hurts. I stayed away from it almost till I was 50. I didn't want to feel it. It was a lot easier to jump off of a building doing a stunt, right? I could get like a little
Adrenaline.
Yeah, but I didn't have to feel my pain. So it was a wonderful blessing breaking both my feet, forcing me to sit still, if you will.
That was one of the things, too, that I wanted to say about your work that I think is profound, is like the humanization of it, you know, like having people see this, and people who are in abusive relationships, like the way immigrants are spoken about, the way that different races are spoken about. Now that the division has happened and a lot of racism has come to light that we maybe necessarily did not realize or didn't want to realize, I feel like the more personal, like, one of the things that has grounded me through anti-racism is being fiercely close to people who are not from this country. And I think that giving people the opportunity, especially because they can look at it privately, they can look at your work and they don't have to answer for themselves, like having that humanization come across is such a gift, you know, to really showcase people for who they are, not who we think we are, not and by the numbers. And not by the, you know, they're from this country and there's this many of them, and it's really like individuals.
It's not about the numbers.
No, it's about who you are and your story. And I mean, how many people would know, like for those of us who grew up here, that you had to, you know, you called it code switching before your language when you went to school. Like that would not even dawn on someone who, you know,
Who just met me.
Or has never met someone from a different culture at all. Like that may not even occur to them that someone needs to go through that every morning. And that's a huge thing to go through every day. Yeah, especially when you're that young. Like those little beautiful, vulnerable things.
I think that's part of why it's so important to travel. Makes you less judgmental when you step out of your bubble.
Yeah, it's important.
It's important.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So this thinking that if you are born in this country, you ever going to feel not excluded? You're going to be part of the community.
I'm going to field that to the expert. Can't answer that
So
question.
you're saying, will I ever feel a part of the community?
You ever going not to feel excluded after so many years living?
Like, will you ever feel not excluded from, like, because you weren't born here, I think, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
In the beginning that you came to this country felt excluded.
Right.
But now after so many years, you still feel that way?
No, I feel like I have been able to make a family for myself, a chosen family, you know, and I think that that's important. Yeah.
But other
Sure.
immigrants that you have probably met, they feel the same way that they, with time, they feel included, they feel accepted.
I mean, that's also something that I am attempting to achieve with my project is create a community for people that are not from here so then they can also feel that they're a part of something, you know.
I think it also depends on your relationship with the country you came from. My father came from Poland and never looked back and loved the United States. He thought he came to Shangri-La when he saw the palm trees and there was sunshine, and he never felt like an outsider in California. So it depends on the person. I also think it depends if you lean more towards introversion or extroversion. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. It is. And it's, depends on everybody's experience, their own experience.
I was born here and I've never felt American.
There you go. See?
I've never felt at home in this country. So
There you have
then
it.
there's that.
And when I go to
Certainly not now.
And when I go to a country of origin, my mother's from Guatemala, my father from Poland, I feel something inexplicable when I'm there. I think there's something about being in a place where you have DNA that wakes you up in a different way than even my home, which is America.
Yeah. Connecting to your ancestors.
Connecting to your ancestors.
Yeah.
Were we supposed to like take questions?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
are there any
Are there-
more? Because I just realized that you had said that at the beginning, and
And we're running out of time, if
No.
anyone has any questions.
I definitely want to maybe.
Yeah, we can take questions from the audience here or the audience on Zoom.
oh,
We have both. Oh,
Camilla?
Hello.
Hi, I guess this is one for you because I was thinking about your projects
Mm-hmm.
with documenting undocumented people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this has in part to do with the trauma that you have from moving here and having to do what you had to do to fit in,
Yeah.
survive, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, throughout doing this sorry, how long have you been doing this project? Exactly?
I've been doing this project for 3 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So throughout the process of doing this project, would you say that it has helped you feel either more included or more, I don't know, secure with yourself and your identity? Because I guess, I'm not saying
Yeah.
specifically, but as you either experience or know, a lot of immigrants, whether they're part American or not, legal or not, there's that split of identity.
Yeah.
Right? From either your ancestors' country or your two countries. So would you say that if you have that, or know people that have that, would you say that this process has helped you kind of come together and find out your spot in that mess?
Yeah, I think so. I'm still grappling with it, I think the reason why I started this project is also because I had this confusion about my identity because, my mother is Brazilian and, I was born in Australia. But I live here and I have this American accent. So people see me as an American, but I don't feel it. And then when I'm in Brazil visiting my families, I get called a gringa, gringa. And then, so that's confusing to me because in my heart, I feel so connected to Brazil, and then, but also Australia is like this untapped part of me that I really didn't connect to because I left when I was 10 and I was so young that I felt like I haven't really been able to reconnect back to that. So it's this pull, right? So I did want to connect to other people that had that sort of split identity. Going forward, have I been able to become okay with that? Yes, but also like I think it's a journey, it's a process, I think and that's the wonderful thing about like life is that, I think I still have time to do that. I don't know. I think it also has a lot to do with the relationship with my father, who's in Brazil. And just grappling with where I belong. But yeah, I do feel like I am okay being here right now, and I do feel like I do have a community of people that see me, and I feel seen by my friends and family here, so yes. But it is a journey, and it's not easy. So, no, it's not. Yeah.
Just for the Zoom audience and for the recording, the question was about did the process help with that? Did the process help with, and I just want to repeat the question because I don't know if anyone on Zoom heard it.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we have questions from the audience, I'll just repeat them. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me to repeat the answer?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No. It was just to fill in the question. That's all.
Okay.
No.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any questions from Zoom?
There's some comments.
Tears
Oh,
is on
are there?
there.
I can't. I haven't been reading the chat. Hold on. I gotta come around. I have not been reading the chat. No.
We're good.
No, it's good.
Anyone else have any questions? Anything?
Yeah.
Because all your work is so personal, multiple different levels, and I forget who it was, one of you who said that you get DMs and stuff from people sharing their life story. Have you ever felt an obligation to like continue that work in a negative or a positive way? Like, do any of you feel like because it's personal, because people relate to it so strongly that at a certain point you're like, I have to keep doing this more than your want to just.
I did. Oh, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
So, the question is, when you get feedback, when you get comments, when you hear from people, does that make you feel like you need to continue the work, right?
Definitely not. I don't owe anybody anything. This is my soul's work.
I definitely did. I think because I'm a nurse. I did my empowerment project with women on and off for like 10 to 15 years. And I was supposed to present it twice last year during COVID. And both of them got canceled. One of them because someone didn't want me to do the lecture because it was too heavy for the audience. And the other time was because of COVID. And I was done. I've been in like a new type of therapy for the past 2 years, and I felt done. And the closure, those lectures were supposed to be my closure, and they didn't happen. So I winded up giving that talk at JKC on a virtual event a couple months ago, and people do reach out to me And then that was it. I closed it. I put an end date on it, which I do feel guilty about sometimes when people approach me or they try to tell me their story, because I want to help and I know how transformative it was for me. And I don't think that I owe them that, but it's like you want to keep giving. But I think that if your heart isn't in it anymore, I didn't feel negative about it, but I just felt like it was done. Like, this is probably the last time I'll show self-portraits ever. Because I feel like the bookends are closed. It's not the last time I'll take them, but I just think it's beside the point after this. And that makes me have a lot of mixed emotions, especially as like a caregiving profession. But I think once your heart's not in it, it's not really doing anybody a service.
When the work is done, it's done. I don't ignore anybody that direct messages me. I always am polite and I'll answer them, but I don't. I've got other work to do. I'm not going to keep going back to something and digging it up again when it's done. And you just know when it's done.
Yeah.
You can feel it. Yeah.
That was a great question, though.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, we are an educational institute, and I just wanted to just get some advice. All of you are dealing with deeply personal projects, right? And because of that, I guess my question is, what advice would you give people about dealing with either your own imagery or interviewing people or photographing people? Like, where is sort of the ethical boundaries that you place? Because I think one of the big things that we don't get taught in art programs is that ethical, boundary. And so that was something I was really thoughtful about, hopefully in the show, and so I was kind of wondering what advice and what things would you say, through the projects you realize like these are things that are important to consider. It's not just about taking the image, it's about taking a good ethical image, if that makes any sense. So like, what sort of advice or things have you come away with?
It was about empowerment, not exploitation. Okay? The person is always more important than the photograph. Always. And I tried to be as dignified as I could with my mother. I'm not going to lie and tell you that there aren't certain family members that are very displeased with this. I don't care. This is my process and my journey, and I handled it, like I said, with as much dignity as possible, and I feel that my mother's depicted in a very dignified way throughout the process. At the beginning, when I started to photograph her, some things were shocking to me. Those were initially in my blog. They're not in the book. They didn't make it to the final edit. So out of tens of thousands of photographs, 51 images made it to the final edit. I think if you're just true to your heart, everything else will work out. Just honor your heart. Honor yourself.
Yeah. I think
And don't forget, write like you're an orphan. Really.
I think for me, it was a very important distinction to never cross the boundary between my professional and creative life. I never worked with anybody that was a patient of mine, and I never crossed that boundary ever. That was A. But I think going through nursing school, it was my second career and it was much later in my life, the ethics part of it, I've seen people, at their most intimate, all the way through to death, but there are things more intimate than death, and I've been there. And I think that you really have to remove a lot of your judgments, and I think that one of the most important things that gets overlooked, especially in school, is you have to make sure that you did your own work. Like, you can't be doing your work through other people. You can't be trying to work out something, okay, on yourself, fine. Like, you can do all the self-portrait you want and work out everything, but you can't come to someone else's session with your own hang-ups or your own motives. You really just have to sit there and soak up what they have and be respectful of what it is that they're going through and all the stuff that you can never imagine that they're going through. And if they want to stop, if they want to say no, I worked with a woman once who got very uncomfortable after the entire session was done. We talked for months, did the whole session, and 2 weeks later something came up. That was archived, never edited, never, nothing. It sits on a hard drive. So I think that listening to the person is paramount, and not exploiting them, because there's a very big difference, but a very thin line between exploitation and authenticity. The vulnerability of the Instagram variety is not really it.
Yeah, I think you touched on empowerment and then listening. I think those two are paramount as well in when you're photographing anybody.
In your case, it's also legal. Like
Yeah.
if there was a legal component.
Yeah, keeping their anonymity if they want to be anonymous, but I think listening and then empowering them, making them feel like, I'm here for them. I'm not,
Right.
it's not about me.
In listening to both your answers, I just got a quote from Ram Dass. The only emotion left for a fully realized being is infinite, unbearable compassion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's necessary as well. Compassion, empathy.
I do think there is also a component that I just thought of talent, which isn't to poo-poo people when they're just starting out, but I think like you really have to make sure your skill level is up to snuff to handle the really heavy lifting. Like if you're photographing someone who's dying, your exposure can be blown out. There is like a certain element of it that is respectful of the situation with your skill level, which I think is also important, not in a mean way, but just to make sure that you are really offering the person that's offering themselves to you something that's valuable.
Yeah, and spending 6 weeks on a project's not a project.
Yeah. I think meeting somebody at where they're at, I think is important.
Well, and I ask that because I feel like there is a lot of photojournalism, I'm going to talk a little trash right now, where, I think people aren't really thinking about that. And there is a lot of imagery out there that it's really about someone taking a good image and not about someone taking a picture of someone, and someone who's living and breathing. And so, I think sometimes in school we don't talk about when you get out in the photo world and you start making work, how do we maintain our ethics and our morality and have compassion and empathy for our subjects? Because I think that's something that we because there's the history of photos full of, right? Terrible images.
And now it's clickbait.
Right.
And now the more shocking your photo is, or the more like on point it is, people go for that. Look at all the people who showed up to the Black Lives Matter protests just to take pictures and left.
Right.
Like it's,
And didn't consider anybody who they were photographing, right? And what that meant for that person.
or didn't stay with them for the day, or didn't do anything after. Yeah.
I think the work has to choose you. You don't choose the work. If you're going to go out and do a project on the homeless because you think it's going to put you on some kind of map, but you really don't care about the homeless, it's
That's
going
gonna
to
show.
It's going to show. So a project chooses you. And and I really believe that, and I also believe there's two ways to make a photo. You make a photo with the camera, or you make a photo with your heart. I like to believe I do it with the latter.
And I think maintaining those relationships post the photograph or post the project, I think is important, that shows that you actually care. You're not there to exploit them. You don't want to just, you're not just taking that photo and then, okay, I'm just showing it to the world and that's it. No, I think it's important to maintain those relationships.
And in fact, after this was released, my mother, Ryan knows, was locked down for 15 months. I didn't just stop visiting her.
Right.
I fought like a mama bear to see her, and I saw her through a gate for 7 months because I refused to accept the draconian measure of you can't see your mother. Like, no, you're not going to keep me from seeing my mother. And they didn't, because they knew at one point I said, I'm going to climb over the fence. Is that what you want? Because I will.
Right, and you
And I
can,
started to, and I scared the hell out of the social worker because I started climbing over the fence. I said, that's what I'm going to do if you don't let me in to see my mother. You will not keep me from her. Yeah. In fact, the elders in California are still locked down. And in January, I wrote to the director and said, I want to see my mother. I want to see her 3 times a week. Make it happen. I don't want any excuses. I've been seeing my mother since January inside, and I'm the only person who's been allowed to go in. So we need to fight against dogma.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
just to sort of
Yeah.
wrap up everything. I think I asked this of Tim and Emily before, but what I said is that you're all documenting trauma in some way or another, right? And so I think what I was sort of curious about is what kind of advice would you give people starting that process, right? Like, what would you tell someone if you could tell yourself at 19, hey, this is going to be a 16-year?
So much to say.
But to prepare you, because I think those of us who work in imagery that is difficult, we are often unprepared sometimes how long or how significant of an impact it's going to have on us. Right. So what sort of advice now that you're sort of been doing it for years or even
You better
a
be
decade?
involved with it on every level, emotionally, spiritually, because it's going to take up a good part of your life. Making the work, and then if you want to get the work out there, that's going to take up another part of your life. So Darcy Padilla did a project on a woman who was addicted to heroin. I think she spent 26 years on that project. Be prepared to put time into it. If you're passionate about it, you won't care because it matters. It matters to put the time into it. If it's, like I said, if you want to get famous or get likes or get into the New York Times and do a project on the homeless, but you really don't care about the homeless, don't do it.
Right.
Don't waste anyone's time. Listen to your heart.
I think these days my advice would have been different from what I would have told myself at 19 because it was a different world. I think that you have to be really fearless in front of the camera, but really careful how you share the work now. I think that the immediacy of people revealing themselves, I do think there's a beauty to it and a blessing, but I feel like sometimes it happens before people are ready. And I think that when you're dealing with trauma, I don't think it's a substitute. And that's why I always say, I also went to therapy. I don't want people thinking I just muscled my way through this with pictures. No, it's 15, 20 years of therapy. But I think that being brave alone and even creating that safe space, with other people, with your project or, when I was 19, that safe space that I created with the women that I worked with at 19, who I still talk to those people, and really honoring that respect and privacy and space between creating and sharing. But to not be afraid of what comes out of it, because I feel like that's also something that's sunken in, this constant feeling of being watched and being on social media, it's just you. Mm-hmm. And you can really sink in with art. You don't have to be anything. You can really dig in.
Yeah, I would say
All those things.
don't share so much. Nobody wants to open up a book where they've seen every single picture already on social media. Let them be surprised.
Do you have anything
Right.
to add to the advice?
I was gonna say maybe give time for yourself and wait till you're ready to show, to do whatever's on your mind and formulate your project. yeah, give yourself time and space for that healing. You know, because it's not going to work out if you haven't done the inner work first, right?
Yeah, and
Thank
if
you
I
so
might,
much,
if
Ryan.
I might add one thing, I didn't start photographing my mother until a year after I finished graduate school, and graduate school was 2 years. And it took me 50 years to get there, so it takes time.
Yeah.
And thank you, Michael, and thank you, Ryan, for including me.
Thank
Well,
you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone. It was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all who joined us on Zoom as well. All right.
Thank you, Zoom crowd.
Thank you.
Hey, nice to hear from Zoom.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks for coming to the JKC Gallery, and check out jkcgallery.online if you want to see future events. And good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Take some food with you.